This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 346 of the DCAU Review. I'm one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend and brother, our other host, Liam. Liam, we are rolling right through March as we continue with more Static Shock reviews. This is one of those shows that as we're looking at the episodes that are left on the board here, we are dwindling when it comes to Static content here. So enjoy it while you can, Static true believers, because there will come a day where no new Static content will be available for us, and we might have to dip into the archives to do a re-review or two if we feel so emboldened. But we are winding down here. We are in season 4, and we have picked up with an interesting one because it features the old odd couple team up. What would happen if two guys were forced to team up that are usually opposed, and throw in some season 1 drama follow-up, and you've got a very interesting episode for us to discuss today.
Absolutely. It's Static and kind of his original villain, going back to the pilot episode of the show, and that's not the only old episode that this episode pulls on. So a lot to talk about with this week's episode, No Man's an Island.
That is right, Liam. But of course, before we get into our review of the episode, including our plot synopsis breakdown, we will, of course, get the official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, which was originally aired here in the United States on February the 21st, 2004, meaning, just a couple weeks ago, we celebrated the 21-year anniversary of this episode's debut. And of course, before we get to the official IMDb synopsis, we'd like to remind you that now is a great opportunity to explore the ways to support the podcast if you like what we do. One of those main ways to support is buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. If you head over there today, you can check out the different ways to support the podcast, including annual support for the podcast, one-time support for the podcast, or monthly support for the podcast, and one-time options as well to support us. And a few different levels there if you choose to become an annual supporter, a couple different tiers of support. All of them come with different perks. They're top tier, coming in with my favorite perk that we've introduced, and that is the ability to ask us a question about the podcast this week, and ask us specifically about the episode we're about to discuss. And we do have a question later on, which will be our question of the week from our supporters. So if you want to join those ranks, ask us some questions about whatever podcast episode we are covering next week or the week after or the next 52 weeks, head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review and explore your options to support the podcast today.
Absolutely. So this is the synopsis for No Man's an Island. That's a contraction. It's not No Man is an Island. Mm-hmm. It's No Man's an Island, which is written by Ralph Saul, directed by Mark Howard, with music by Max Gauss, and animation by Coco and Dong Yang. And that synopsis, this very long synopsis, reads as such. Static and Hotstreak are kidnapped and forced to team up in an escape, during which they rescue other metahumans who have also been kidnapped for experimentation with the statue of Edwin Alva Jr.
You could probably, it's one of those.
It actually wasn't that long. It's just a lot of big words.
I would say it is one of those things, though, where if you're like grading the sentence, your teacher would probably draw a red line through that middle portion is like not necessary. They'd like a little notation, like just put the beginning portion, Static and Hotstreak, and then Elva's Edwin Elva Jr.'s name at the end there regarding the experimentation, and you kind of have a nice little synopsis there. But I guess more information sometimes than not enough. Our plot synopsis starts with the unfortunate spoiler alert recap of some very early on episodes, as we discussed, including the episode Junior, which we did cover way back when in the archives. If you're interested in hearing our thoughts on that or a general recap of that, check that out in the archives on your favorite podcast app or DCAUreview.com. So we do see the tragic tale of Edwin Jr.'s unfortunate, not quite demise. He is frozen in not carbonite, but some sort of concrete substance that he's made himself into after overdosing on his Bang Baby powdered gas things that he equipped himself with. So he is in this frozen state, and other than a few one-offs, we haven't really seen much of Edwin Elva Sr. since this. We do know that he's obviously been working on attempting to, is defrost the right word? I don't know here. I'm just gonna unfreeze.
Stone.
De-stone. Yeah, he's they're working on getting him to be a real boy again, and but to no success. So we do learn, of course, that in this sequence, though, we kick things off in the episode as Virgil is giving a call to his friend Frida to see if she or Daisy might want to chill for the evening, watch a scary movie, do something together. Frida and Daisy already have plans, however, as they're going to do some very girly things. They're going to get their hair did, they're going to get their nails did, they're going to do their makeovers, they're making candles. Virgil decides not masculine enough for his liking, so he's going to find something else to do and maybe hang out with Richie. Richie's actually gone, though, that weekend, so he's unavailable. So just when it seems like Static has nothing on his plate to do, we find out that a siren goes off. You know, the nuns and the dynamite that are always popping up when the hero needs it. In this case, it's just a siren. But we do see that Hotstreak is on the loose, and he's on a joyride in a stolen sports car, riding through the streets of Dakota, causing general havoc. And just in time, we do see Static catch up with Hotstreak. They have a little bit of verbal jawing back and forth. We see that Hotstreak then jumps out of the car. He's had about enough from hearing it from Static and decides to take on Static one-on-one.
Now this is what I call a hot car. Coincidentally, this is also what the police call a hot car. Static. Can a guy even go for a joyride anymore? Sure. Drop you off at county lockup? Oh man, watch the paint job. Butt in. This is it. I'm really starting to lose my temper.
But just as things start to get going, we see some military-like vehicles arrive, some giant hover planes descend on the streets of Dakota, and one of the gentlemen jumps out and electrocutes Hotstreak with a very familiar-looking weapon. Maybe talk about that in animation and visuals. But he shocks Hotstreak, and it seems that Static is welcome the help, but is a little bit confused. And he himself, when he's not looking, also gets attacked from behind. And unfortunately, our hero is incapacitated for the moment, only to wake up moments later in a strange holding cell. He is with Hotstreak, and they attempt to use their powers. There's some sort of barrier that's preventing them, an electrified barrier or force field that is preventing them from leaving. And as they go to use their powers first against each other, and then just in general to maybe try and escape, they realize that something is preventing them from being able to use their powers. They assume that there's a contraption in the plane that is preventing them, a dampener of sorts for their powers. They also look down and happen to realize that they are linked together, like it or not now, by this very fancy looking arm cuff contraption. So they are this is where the Odd Couple storyline here gets off to an interesting start, as they are quick, obviously, to attempt to maybe fight each other. They do everything they can to maybe try and rip the cuff off, and they're not able to budge it one bit. And just as they are kind of accepting their fate, they realize that they're going to have to work together to perhaps plan some sort of escape. The plane does land on said, at least referenced, island, and where they realize that they're in some sort of encampment or a holding cell, and they realize that their time to act is upon them, and they must, as soon as they are let out of the plane, they're going to take on this group of military soldiers. So they do what they do, despite a little bit of butting of heads. Of course, one person wants to pull one way, the other person wants to pull the other way. They are able to overcome the rather large contingent of guards pretty quickly. But then as they attempt to remove the handcuffs again, neither fire nor electricity does anything other than hurt the other person that's chained or locked up to the other person at that point. So we realize at that point that they're going to have to maybe go out on a little bit of an exploration, because in the battle and in his general headstrongness, Hotstreak melted the only key, apparently, that was available to unlock themselves.
Get up! Thanks. Now get out of my way! 1 down! 2 down! 3! Man, I'm smoking! Great. Now we're gonna have to walk out of here. What do you mean, we? Bet you this'll unlock us. Stupid thing doesn't fit.
It's melted. You fried it when you hit that guy.
Yeah? We'll see. The stuff's some kind of high-tech, stupid something or other.
Can I quote you on that, Professor?
Ow! Nothing.
The locking mechanism's electrical. Maybe I can short it.
Ow!
Well, that's not working either.
Maybe you think that's funny.
Well, yeah.
As they are attempting to kind of take in their surroundings, some unmanned drones, or as they call them, droids, show up and begin to chase them. They end up deep in what looks like the forest, and they're after being chased by some soldiers on hover bikes. They find an abandoned hover bike, and well, the next act is pretty much just Return of the Jedi on the moon Endor, pretty much, because Hotstreak and Static are riding together on one of these bikes and are being pursued by enemy combatants, and more specifically, more droids.
That's right. So as they make their way through the forest, getting chased frequently by soldiers and droids, as you mentioned, they finally make it to some sort of laboratory or facility. And as they evade the guards, they look into the window of said facility, and they notice a few familiar faces, as we see not only Gear, but Rubber Band Man and Talon have apparently also been kidnapped by our mysterious benefactors here. And so Static and Hotstreak make their way into the building, and before they can they have another action beat here, I think, where Hotstreak decides to fly away.
You're starting to be a real drag.
If you don't like me, you're gonna hate those guys.
You're slowing me down!
Who's leading who? Flame for brains?
I didn't remember that Hotstreak could fly. Is this the first episode where he could fly?
Yeah, that feels like a new deal.
A new
me.
wrinkle to his powers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So yeah, he and Static fly into the sky for a bit as they continue to evade, as mentioned, and then they realize as they get, this is I think the part where they steal the scooter and then fly through the forest, but the scooter is a little too damaged and they're not able to make it across the large ocean as they are, as mentioned, on an island. So they decide to go back to the facility, and they decide they need a working hovercraft in order to get out of here. So as they sneak in, they happen to find a nurse, an evil nurse. She's just that should be her name in the credits. Evil nurse. I think it's just nurse, but she just stereotypical. But I think but a good employee. I think doing her part to be evil. As she's walking around, they realize that she happens to have a working. I don't know why the nurse has a working handcuff key, but she does. And Virgil, using his powers and a little bit of finesse, is able to steal it off her belt without her noticing, and unlocks the cuffs that freeze both of them. At this point, Hotstreak has also been talking about how much he hates hospitals and that he apparently spent time in a hospital as a kid and is not too keen to go back. But Virgil assures him that they gotta stick together, and that if they don't work together, it's going to be a lot more than 2 years that he could be stuck here this time. So, as mentioned, they work together and get the cuffs off. But as the cuffs unlock, Hotstreak just can't resist pumping his fist and shouting out. He's so happy to be free of being tethered to Static. And at that point, of course, he says it so loudly that the nurse hears him. And in fact, the guards come running and opening fire. And they blast Virgil, knocking him out. And Hotstreak seemingly leaves him in the lurch, not really taking Virgil's words to heart about getting everything on about staying on the same page. So at this point, we see that Edwin Alva is here, and he's sort of been watching over the whole thing, and we find out that he wants to do something with all of these metahumans, and they're going to try to drain their metahumanness, their bang babiness, through some sort of generic science machine, in order to de-rock Edwin Jr., I guess.
We can do what you say, of course. It is dangerous, but it may work.
I don't pay you to do things that may work. I want results. Do whatever it takes. Clear?
Alva!
What you are suggesting, it could be the end of our 3 specimens.
They're disposable. Just find a cure for my son.
So, and Edwin Alva Sr. is quite clear that these 3, Gear, Rubber Band Man, and Talon, are completely disposable to him, and that he's not interested in working with that. So, as Static seemingly is dead to rights, there he's and the other 3 metahumans are begin to be, well, they start getting sucked, I think it's fair to say, and
that's one way.
Start getting sucked by that machine, all 3 of them, and Virgil is so weak he doesn't have any power. He tries to grab a hold of a power line on the floor nearby to absorb a little energy, but the evil nurse returns and kicks his hand away so that he can't absorb any more power. So she thinks, but here's a new power as well. Virgil can apparently absorb electricity through his toes as well. So that's an interesting wrinkle here, but that allows him to absorb power through the line and get him back on his feet, and he's able to knock out the few remaining guards, and as well as disable the machine before it can either permanently drain all 3 of the metahumans or cure Edwin Jr. for that matter. So as Static works on freeing the 3 metahumans, that's when Edwin Alva Sr. it's hard when they're both named the same character. Edwin Sr. sends in all of the troops. All the stormtroopers come in with their pitchforks to blast, and we get a big fun action sequence that we'll certainly talk more about in visuals, I'm sure. And they're just all the bad guys are blasting their way through. They can't seem to find an end to this wave. But then finally we see Edwin Sr. Descending from an elevator, telling all of the guards to stand down. And you might think that this is out of the goodness at his heart, but here's where we get, and this is sort of a theme that we'll talk about in other categories as well. This is Hotstreak's Han Solo moment.
All troops stand down. I repeat, all troops, drop your weapons.
You heard the man. I thought you were out of here. And what, fly a hovercraft for myself? Sports cars are my thing. Static, you should see this. It's Elvis' son. We're losing him.
Is there any way to save him?
I don't know. There isn't enough power.
He did not, in fact, get while the getting is good. He came back to help the greater good by finding where Edwin was held up and holding him at, not at gunpoint, at fire hand point to encourage him to tell his troops to stand down. And that it looks like the heroes and the anti-heroes for the case of this episode they've all but won, but then Edwin's doctor chimes in and says that if they don't do something quick, Edwin Jr. is likely not going to make it. Gear, the genius, looks at the computer and sort of comes to the same conclusion. And here's where we kind of get a payoff to what this whole episode's been about, as not only Static, but he and Hotstreak decide they're going to make a little bit of self-sacrifice to try to save the day here at the end.
That's right. Yeah, our hero does hero things, and he insists that he's going to perhaps be able to power it by himself, give the machine enough power in order to save Edwin Jr. So he insists that they hook him up to the machine despite Gear's many protests. And then as it becomes very apparent, now Gear, by the way, is assisting the Eastern European nondescript country doctor or scientist that was originally working on the machine. We have mean nurse and nondescript Eastern European scientist. Those are our character names, I think, here. And as Gear is assisting him, it becomes very apparent very quickly that despite Static being pushed to his limit, it's not quite enough power, Captain.
We still need more.
Please, it's his only chance.
Fire me up. If he can take it, so can I.
It's not working.
Get out of the way.
Stop! You don't know what you're doing.
Hey, I'm a genius.
Hotstreak steps up to the plate and insists that if Static can do it, he can do it too. He hooks himself up to the machine, or has himself hooked up to the machine, and together their power continues to be drained. At that point, things are looking grim because despite both of them being pushed to their limits, it's just not quite working. And the scientist is becoming frustrated. Gear insists that he take over because, checks notes, I'm a genius, Right. So he begins to push a bunch of buttons on the machine, and whatever happens, we get a sequence where we see Edwin Jr.'s DNA spring back to life, and the rock formation melts away just in time, and our hero and anti-hero in this episode's case are the big heroes after all, providing life back to Edwin Jr., who comes out of his tank, and he's doing just fine, and gives his dad a big old couldn't resist that, sorry. There's a song you could write a song about this, I think.
And if you ever played at a wedding, everyone would lose their mind. I have a feeling.
I think so, yes. But back to the actual episode, we get a warm embrace between Edward Sr. and Edward Jr., who I guess bygones are bygones at this point. Edwin Jr. has forgiven his father and just happy to be alive. Edwin Sr. is happy that Edwin Jr. is alive, and we get a nice warm embrace. Later on, we see the rest of the group, including Talon and Gear, Static, and Rubber Band Man alongside Static and Hotstreak, all dropped off back at Dakota, waiting there next to the stolen sports car from our opening sequence.
So are we picking up our fight where we left off?
Nah, you can take that car back. I got me a sweeter ride. Alva said it was okay. Hey, it's the least Alva owes me. Fair enough. Oh, damn!
And he takes off and up and away in the gigantic hover plane, and off soaring into the night sky, giving out I would say a very Han Solo inspired woohoo into the night as well. And that's Static just lets him go. I guess he did enough good in this episode to warrant a no further punishment. So that wraps up our episode for this week. All right. I think there are bones of an episode here that, while they are not necessarily original, you have the hero and the villain that are inevitably forced to work together in order to overcome a gigantic problem for them both to survive. That's not an original idea for this episode. However, there's a reason why it is one that is, I don't know, frequently is fair to say, but it has been revisited multiple times. There's an interesting dynamic when you see our heroes and villains have to work together. In the DCAU later on, we see Superman and a old Vandal Savage in the future have to work together in order to, and put their differences aside in order to work for the greater good, to get Superman to return to his own time and defeat the whatever those bug people are. But we're not talking about that episode this week. But it is an interesting idea to have a hero and a villain have to work together to cooperate in an attempt to defeat a common foe against their will, and then ultimately coming out on the side of good on the other side. So I think there's something interesting there. I think it's interesting, especially Hotstreak and Static, to see them, how it's established very early on in the episode that both of them do not want to work together. They somewhat take enjoyment out of causing each other a little bit of pain through their superpowers as they both try their failed attempts at escaping. I think something gets lost here when you do Star Wars for like 2 scenes, a sequence where we're just on hover bikes, and I get it. Maybe you needed to pack your action heavily into the middle sequence because the final sequence is more, the stakes are raised, but there's not a lot of action to be had in watching your hero strapped to a gurney and electrocuted.
Yeah.
It feels like you're not going to get much interesting visually from that. So it's more of a tense situation versus action heavy. So you pack your chase sequence in the middle of it and throw in some homages to Star Wars. But the we're going to unfreeze. We're going to do this thing that we've kind of been leading up to now for 3 seasons, and we're finally going to solve it. And it's through, I think you described it perfectly, magic science machine that somehow turns other metahumans' powers into unfreezing Edwin Alva Jr. It feels like we had the idea of, what if we had not just Static and Hotstreak working together, but let's throw Rubber Band Man in there and Talon and Gear also, and they all have to work together. which kind of feels like its own episode. Like you could have done a separate episode where all 5 of these metahumans had to team up instead of establishing it at the beginning with Static and Hotstreak. I don't know. It feels like I would rather have just seen those two kind of work together and solve the problem, as opposed to having all the other metahumans show up. But yeah, I think there's the bones of something that are here, but I think the idea that three metahumans couldn't solve this problem when they were hooked up to the machine, and then Static does the heroic thing to try and sacrifice himself, which, thinking that your power is greater than 3 other metahumans is bold. And I get it. You want your hero to be sacrificial. That's a hero's defining characteristic. And then, all right, well, we'll throw Hotstreak in there because he's kind of redeeming himself based on the story arc we're telling here. But then it's really only solved because Gear steps in at the last second and knows what buttons to push.
Yeah, he tippy tappies away. Yeah, like I said, I think I do agree. There's bones of a good episode. And there's a lot of fun action and stuff we'll talk about. It's fun to do the weird Star Wars homage in the middle of the episode. It feels like this was like a grab bag of ideas, and they were just like, let's just, it's a casserole. Like,
right.
It's
right.
a what's left in the fridge that's about to expire.
A cornucopian.
Yeah, exactly.
A smorgasbord.
Like, oh, it would be fun to do this episode where Static and one of his, worst enemies are handcuffed together, and they have to work together even though they hate each other. It's like, okay, that's fun. And then the idea of bringing back Edwin Alva and his son from the earlier season, it's like, yeah, that's a loose end, and interesting to see what like Alva's been doing, because he kind of hasn't been as prevalent in these later seasons. So yeah, like I like those ideas. And then yeah, the idea of like, oh, we're gonna get like a big weird, bad guys and good guys teaming up and kicking butt together episode. It's like, yeah, that's fun as like at the end there. But and then yeah, the ending just being like through nondescript means, because at first I thought when they said, oh, it's about power, it's like, so it's like literal, they don't have enough electricity. But it's like, no, he just hooks himself into the same machine and the same thing happens, and then Hotstreak hooks himself in. So it's like, well, okay, Static I can buy is like I'm like on another level of power, but it's kind of like, this isn't Dragon Ball. Like, we don't have like a little power level that pops up next to them to let us know, how strong one Bang Baby is compared to the other, or why Static and Hotstreak are. I mean, they have cooler, more like visually destructive powers potentially, but I don't know why that means that their meta-humanness is more valuable to this machine. But whatever, it's fine because it's a payoff to them finally getting on the same page or whatever at the end, I guess. But yeah, it's a lot of happenstance and a lot of like I said, a vague science machine that sucks power out of metahumans to de-stonify the Edwin Jr. It's like, I don't know. It feels like I said, kind of a grab bag, some interesting threads that you could have almost all been their own episode. Like all of the metahumans being kidnapped and put on an island could be interesting, but I don't know. Like if you had like a Craven the Hunter type like character that's like trying to hunt them for sport or something, and as opposed to it being wrapped up in this other long time resolution to this Edwin and Edwin Jr. thing, and really, I mean, maybe it was mentioned in another episode or two after that he appeared in, but it's like, it's not like we've been constantly seeing Edwin Sr. over these next couple of seasons of Static, constantly searching for a cure. So it's like he just built a magic machine and and then it worked because of the power of friendship. So and Gear being smart enough to tap the right buttons when the doctor guy was not smart enough to tap the right buttons. So
perfect.
Yeah, like I said, I think this episode's a lot of fun. It's an easy watch, but there's definitely some nits to pick. So I ended up settling on a 6 out of 10 for my plot score.
Yeah, pretty unsurprisingly, I'd say, given our general makeup of this show. But I also settled on a 6 out of 10 for my score as well. Yeah, I think the other thing that was kind of looming over this, I don't know about you. I have no recollection of seeing this episode. Like I have zero recollection. It's possible that I saw it at some point, but I certainly didn't remember it watching it today. So it kind of pained me that the opening bit, and I know why they have to do it because it's the fourth season, but you did the whole previously on Static, and it's all Edwin Alva stuff, and you're like, oh, well, there's no mystery behind who's behind this, which is kind of a plot point in the middle of the episode that
Yes.
Alva gets revealed as, oh, they're brought to this island. All of these other metahumans are also brought to the island
It's a
because
little bit, if I could make a modern analogy, it's a little bit like, imagine you made a Captain America movie, and the whole movie is like Harrison Ford is taking these pills. What are these pills going to do to him?
Mm-hmm.
And then in the third act, the pills turn him into a big red Hulk.
Whoa.
But then for like 9 months before the movie came out, every trailer and commercial has him as the big red Hulk in it already. It would not necessarily come off as like a great reveal in a film at that point, when he turns into a red Hulk, and it's like bum bum bum. It's like, well, we knew because you kind of told us already what was happening here. So it's like it's not the rest, the rest of the people working on it's fault that they decided to tack on the previously on, but it does kind of ruins the suspense, to your point. Just a modern analogy that popped into my head.
That has no basis in real life, by the way. It was just a hypothetical situation. Yes. Yeah. So that was the other thing that kind of, I don't want to say ruined it, but I would say made it a little bit less satisfactory when you get the big, because it's interesting. You're like, all right, well, who are these essentially, like we call them stormtroopers that are capturing these people? Why are they capturing them? Why is our hero being lumped in with this other guy that's, the evil metahuman or evil bang baby? And then they get to this island, they're doing the mystery, like, okay, we need to figure out who's behind all of this. And then when we get the reveal, they're like, oh my gosh, it's Alva. And then you like, oh my gosh, he's actually built this machine that is attempting to somehow pseudoscience its way into de-rockifying his son. Like, all right, cool. That's fine. But yeah, knowing that, all right, well, we have a previously on Static attacked onto the beginning of this because Alva's going to show up, I guess. And show up he did. So yeah, I like your analysis of this. I think it does feel very much like they went into a hat and picked out each act. Act one was, Static and Hotstreak have this fight in Dakota, get knocked out by these soldiers. Act two is let's homage a bunch of Star Wars stuff as they're, looking around. Mm-hmm. And Act three is, all right, there's also other metahumans there and they have to team up. And also Hotstreak gets to do Han Solo stuff and come back and help save the day. So, yeah. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category here after that sort of mixed reaction that we had. They're still on the positive side, though. We're above 50%. That's a D. D's get degrees, as they say. So still a passing grade in some places. Let's talk about this week's animation and visuals brought to you by the Coco and Dong Yang Animation Studios. And then, of course, we said this was directed by, or given a director's credit, by Mark J. Howard. What are your thoughts on animation and visuals for the episode? Especially one that is, kind of all over the place. As we mentioned in our synopsis, the climax of the episode is really, while it's intense because it's like, oh my gosh, is he going to kill the other set of bang babies first? And then it's like, oh my gosh, are Static and Hotstreak also going to die? It's not very action heavy in the way that things necessarily are portrayed on screen. The fighting, the fist fighting and punching kind of ends, I would say, towards the very beginning of Act 3. So not a lot to go on there. But what were your thoughts generally on the action for our first two sequences? And I'm sure we'll have plenty, as two fellow Star Wars fans who have some appreciation for that middle act as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The first two acts are definitely the most action packed, to your point. I like the opening chase sequence with Hotstreak is a lot of fun. And them being kind of longtime rivals who kind of know each other's games, so they're a little bit more evenly matched than maybe they were in previous meetings. I think is fun, and that's illustrated there. And then the stormtrooper guys literally just like ropes drop behind Hotstreak and they just drop out of the sky. I think that's fun. And then the kind of the confusion there, you already kind of alluded to it, they're little pitchfork taser things, which why does getting electrocuted work on static?
Why doesn't he just absorb it, right? Yeah, that is a very
right.
That's a big
I imagine if you tried to set Hotstreak on fire, I imagine it would not do anything to him because he sets himself on fire every time he uses his powers. But somehow, I don't know, it's a reverse charge. I don't know. Like, I guess if it's, I don't know. I feel like there's probably been other episodes where this has happened too, but I was just like, well, what is the taser doing to him that knocks him out or stuns him in any way? If anything, as we see later, shouldn't that just give him like a power boost? But whatever. Anyway, I think that sequence is pretty cool. That opening bit where they're escaping, and I think at one point Hotstreak uses like a wall of fire to shield them or to kind of cover them a little bit from the TIE fighter type scooter things that are flying down to shoot at them. I think that's a fun sequence. And I feel like we get a little bit more over the top action than we are maybe used to with Static there. And then I'll let you touch on more of the Star Wars stuff in a second. But then I did really enjoy when our four metahumans, after Hotstreak kind of seemingly leaves Static in the lurch. I really enjoyed seeing Rubber Band Man and Talon and Gear and Static all team up to battle the stormtrooper guys for a while as well. I think that's a really fun and fluid sequence, and how they kind of move around each character. We've talked about that, how hard it can be to animate and direct a sequence where you have multiple heroes and you have to kind of keep cutting between them and everything. So I thought they did a really great job with that as well.
Yeah, that was that's a good point here, because we're still, I guess this is simultaneously going on with Justice League stuff, so maybe it's not completely new to sequence out some multiple action sequences like this, but it's they did do a pretty good job in seeing that. I did like seeing some of, anytime we see a stretchy guy, a Rubber Band Man involved, he does this thing where he like stretches his arm up and then he like swings from his arm to kind of take out some of the bad guys. I for some reason I cannot remember in any of the other animated sequences where we've seen another stretchy guy that power shown that way, but it makes perfect sense where a guy like uses his arm almost to swing from to take out a bunch of the other guys. We also see him bounce around like a ball, of course, which is like the hallmark, I feel like, of a stretchy guy attack. But
absolutely,
I did enjoy that as well. Certainly some good stuff in those sequences. Seeing Talon on the side of good, is this her first redemption arc also? Because she's usually a villain also. I don't remember. Did we miss an episode where she was a good girl, or is it just all of a sudden because of the stakes here that she also has to turn to the side of battling the common foe?
Yeah, I think as far as I know, this is her first time saddling up with the good guys, so to speak.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. But yeah, I agreed with you. Other couple things. We do get, you can tell that the car as well and the hover, it's not a hover carrier. It's a hover. I forget what those are called. It's a plane, but I'm sure there's a military name for it. I apologize. I'm not military, so I don't know the official name of it. But whatever that air carrier is, they use CGI with some cell shading on top of it for a lot of the sequence, especially in the car chase sequence, the way that the sports car whips around. It was okay. Not the best cell shading on top of CGI that I've ever seen. Very clearly still CGI, especially I think the frame rate doesn't quite match up with the airplane, but it was fine. It wasn't the worst thing. It didn't stand out like some of the things I've nitpicked about the Justice League use of it and those early episodes of Justice League. So I guess we're 3 years into using that integrated into this 2D animation here. So better than it did at the start, I guess, but still not ideal in my world, but whatever. Yeah, as far as the middle sequence, though, as we mentioned, we'll certainly talk about it in music as well, because it's not just the visuals. But that middle sequence, as soon as they get out into the forest, I was like, oh, they're probably, and they see the bike. I was like, oh, they're gonna do Star Wars here. They're gonna do the speeder bike chase in Return of the Jedi, and they kind of do. They get on the bike and they get chased. They're, instead of being chased by other stormtroopers, though, they're chased by those kind of TIE fighter probe droid looking things. They even call them droids, which is funny, that are coming after them. And we get some pretty good chase sequence action there that goes through that sequence. So, I did appreciate that. And then even, like I said, the story arc that matches up with Hotstreak at the end, of him being Han Solo, just kind of puts a nice little bow on that, with him returning to save the day, or help save the day. Yeah, I think the sequence where we finally get the speaking of Return of the Jedi, where Elva Jr. is freed from not carbonite. There's actually a sequence where I think it's when Hotstreak and Static first break into the lab and they see Elva. You see like a group of the soldiers pushing. I can't remember if it's Rubber Band Man. I think it's Rubber Band Man, like on a little gurney, like through, and it's like, oh, that's Empire Strikes Back. That's where Boba Fett is pushing Han and Carbonite through Cloud City. Like they're just pulling all kinds of stuff from Star Wars here. So extra point for me for that one. I appreciated that. But yeah, once Elva Jr. gets melted at the end and is kind of unfrozen from not carbonite, they do this like sequence where they go inside, and even though it's completely CGI, you see his like DNA go from its frozen nature to kind of warming back up. And I don't remember if we see that in the original episode or not, but I thought that was a neat little trick to kind of like the reversal where it's completely cold and then you see it warm up, kind of turn red, and then things start moving again, and then they cut to the shot on the outside of him where the stone starts to heat up and kind of melt away, much like it does the carbonite does in Return of the Jedi. So lots of neat little Star Wars homages here throughout the episode. So definitely picked up on those and appreciated those for sure. As I stated, though, I think everybody looks on model. I do think that opening sequence between Static and Hotstreak battling in the street, though, is probably from the car chase and then their subsequent little fire versus electricity battle. I think that's probably the height of the action for me. I think it was sequenced well. I think everything looks pretty smooth. Characters look on model for everything that I could tell. So not a lot of complaints here. I think the only thing is it's just kind of, you have those action beats at the beginning where you have Static versus Hotstreak, and then they get put in the ship, and then you have Static and Hotstreak versus the stormtroopers, and then you have the little chase sequence. So it's so front loaded, it feels like, as far as the action is concerned, that you almost kind of just have this big lull where there isn't much action, other than, like, I guess the mini sequence of the giant team up between all the metahumans. So there's some good stuff here in the episode. I think nothing blew me away necessarily or was outstanding, and some of having your climax of the episode be guys strapped to a table being electrocuted kind of takes some of that maybe that pomp and circumstance out of it. So I went with a 7 out of 10 for my animation visuals. I think everything's fine and dandy, but nothing necessarily blew me away. What about you?
Yeah, I went just 1 point higher with 8 out of 10. I think I was just really tickled by that, like I said, that big kind of group action sequence towards the end that maybe notched it up an extra point for me. But yeah, a good solid outing. I want to say also those little drone or droids, as they're called, very similar to the floating camera spy things that Grodd uses in Secret Society.
Oh,
to spy on the Justice League when they're doing their trainings or whatever.
Interesting.
I don't know. Maybe maybe Alva Industries sold some parts or some technology to an unnamed conglomerate that happened to be owned by a big gorilla. That's all I'm saying.
So we think that Alva probably got gear from Intergang that was made from the Tools of the Trade episode from Apocalypse, when Mannheim gets that like horseshoe looking. It kind of also resembles Boba Fett's long rifle, also, if you think about it, or the Mandalorian's long rifle in the Mandalorian. So kind of that horseshoe electricity type shape at the end of it. So we think that maybe he got those weapons from them, and then in exchange, he passed along technology that was either borrowed or he sold it on the underground arms deal to the Legion of Doom, or to the Secret Society.
I'm not a supervillain anymore, but I do have all of these supervillain gear that's just going to be sitting in a warehouse somewhere. So might as well sell these to some enterprising gorilla somewhere.
That's right.
That's my theory, at least.
I like that theory. Head canon until proven otherwise, as we say. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And Max Gauss, responsible for this week's music, as you noted at the beginning. We do right off the bat get a really, really interesting song immediately as Static is on the phone. It's like that, y'all. 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 Here I go. Is the tune and the lyrics to that song. I also noted we get this is a different Hotstreak theme, right?
It's not like the fire right. one from previous episodes.
This one has the lyrics. The one that I picked out was "Can't handle this. I'm hot, hot, hot. Can't handle this. I'm hot." So we get a different theme song, still very fire based, obviously, in our lyrics here, but a new theme for Hotstreak, I suppose. And then we get maybe my favorite. They just play the Imperial March in the middle of the the chase.
Yeah, I was like, how did this like to the moment where I was like, I need to check the credits to see if they actually licensed
right
John Williams music for this, because it is so close. Like it's not like the Centuries of the Last Cosmos where it's like vaguely Star Warsy. It's like They got as close as I think you could get to just doing that music without getting sued by Lucasfilm.
Get on. What the heck are those things? Wearing your seatbelt? To go back and save Gear and the others.
Yeah, if this were to go on YouTube and you were to just play that track, I feel like Disney would copyright strike you. Like, there's no way that you could get, like, I literally put it in my notes. I was like, how did this get approved? This tune where they were just like, especially knowing, well, I guess at the time it wasn't under the Mouse's hat. It was under 20th Century Fox or whatever it was at that time. But nowadays, I don't think you would tempt the Mouse, knowing how litigious they are, to even tiptoe around that so closely. Because that is, I mean, you don't go into the action. You go into the opening bits of it with the drums and the general tune, but you don't get the full thing play out. But it's instantly recognizable. Like you can tell exactly what they were going for. There is no question about what the song is. And I think if you played it to somebody, you're like, oh, like if you were playing Name That Tune, like you could play this and people would go, oh, that's the Imperial March. Like, I don't think that people would be like, is that a Imperial March ripoff? What is that? But yeah, almost too close for comfort, I'd say. But kudos to them for getting that past the proper people.
Yeah, and you go right from Imperial March into like the Forest Moon of Endor, like Luke and Leia sneaking around with the Ewoks music, like,
yeah,
like again, very very close.
Yeah, very fun stuff. Obviously, if you know it, you know it, and who most people obviously know it. So you take one of the most famous pieces of music in cinematic history, let alone like Star Wars history, and you put it you just kind of just you do the I guess they did the what Vanilla Ice did with Under Pressure, and you add another beat in there, and it's not the same song. It's a different song.
Dun, 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 dun,
Right,
and then you're
exactly.
fine.
Then you're fine, exactly. Um, with that said, we also get some really intense music towards the end in our battle scene. I didn't hear the static theme used. I didn't at
Mm-mm.
least it didn't jump out to me. And this is interesting because this is 2 weeks in a row now where we don't have the classic static theme. And I know we're into season 4, which makes me wonder did they intentionally like lay out on that as we got deep into the latter half of the fourth season, of the final season, that they just decided to kind of leave that at the door and just go with some general fight music, because usually that fight scene is punctuated with the static theme.
Yeah, I was gonna say I did think, especially like when he powers up against the like when he starts absorbing the energy and he springs into action to save the other bang babies there. I was waiting for it, and it didn't really kick in. So I was a little disappointed as well there.
Overall, though, I think it's really hard to nitpick and dislike the music, especially when, as we've already said, you essentially put a copywritten song, you got it through, and really drive home the fact, like, in case you can't visually see what we're going for, audibly, you'll be able to match it up. Like, we're going to really hit you over the head with this. And I appreciate the fact that they were able to do that and went that far. I think the music is great in this episode. I went with an 8 out of 10 for my score. I think it's quite possibly the strongest thing of the episode. And it's a lot of fun because of the little things that they were able to get in there. What about you?
Yeah, I gave it an 8 out of 10. So I enjoyed it quite a bit there. I think the Star Wars nods alone always I think would have brought it up anyway. But yeah, I thought it was even some of the incidental music, like when they're kind of just realizing when they're sort of about to land on the island and stuff, I thought had like a real like there's a real sort of gravitas to it with some of the strings and things they brought in, which felt more like you would hear it in like a Superman or something like that, or a Justice League, not so much the normal static music. But so I thought they did a good job switching it up along with the great Star Wars homages. So really good outing this week.
All right, Liam, let's take it home with our final category of the day, and that'll, of course, be our voice actors and actresses that we have to cover with this week's voice cast.
That is right. It's a lot of familiar names that we've talked about here and there before. Quickly, I will mention we do have Nell Wade as nurse, as she is credited in here. I'm not sure. Hey, like not in an insulting way. I don't know where they found this lady because she has very few credits as a voice actor, and then she does have a few credits as it looks like a writer on some children's things, and some additional crew credits. So I don't know. Maybe she was just an aspiring voice actor as well. But again, she does. Like I said, I just think it's funny that there's an evil nurse in this episode for some reason. Like, I don't know. Maybe it adds to like what they touch on with Hotstreak having a fear of hospitals, so they have a mean nurse there. But we have Nicholas Guest as our as you put it, the vaguely European doctor that can't figure out how to make the machine work good. A veteran voice actor, a lot of video games to his credit. He's fine for what's asked of him.
He also did Jack in one of the Batman Beyond episodes, I believe.
Oh, that's correct. Yes,
He
was Martian Manhunter in Brave and the Bold as well, if I'm not mistaken. So
and
we've
Luminous, maybe. Oh, he was he. I think he played him in, according to the DCAU wiki, he played him in Justice League, in the Justice League only.
That's right. Okay.
Not the actual episode, because that's Tony Stark. So
right, of course,
not that.
We do also briefly get Kadeem Hardison as Rubber Band Man. I think he only has like one line, and it's a rubber pun, but glad he's around. And I don't know if we mentioned it. I think this is the debut of the new Rubber Band Man suit, where it's just like a purple span, like he lost his hood and he's got like a dark purple suit instead of his lighter purple gear now. So he's ditched the hood and he's gotten like a cool cell shaded highlight suit now, but it's very nondescript also. Like there's no he didn't get an emblem or anything.
He needs a logo. That's right. He needs to brand himself. Somebody get this guy a publicist.
I'm telling you, isn't he like kind of a famous musician too? Like,
yep.
You'd think that'd be like he should like, I don't know, put the logo for his next album or something on his chest. Get some free pub here. But anyway, yeah, nice to hear him back as well. We have Danica McKellar voicing Frida and Talon. Although I think she's not usually Talon. I think that's Tia Tejada is usually Talon. So I think she just filled in again. Talon says like one word in this. So,
right.
But they have Danica McKellar there at the start of the episode as Frida to regale Virgil with what she and Daisy will be up to in the evening. We do have Kerrigan Mahan, what a name, as Edwin Alva Sr. Returning to this role. We've talked about him before. He's doing Michael Douglas in I guess in Wall Street or one of those. A classic Michael Douglas impression here. Maybe best known in live action playing the villain Goldar. I think it's a villain. I don't know. I never watched Power Rangers, but he was in like 130 some episodes of that. So
goodness,
Goldar in Power Rangers there, as well as quite a bit of other voice acting work to his credit as well. Yeah, he's good. He doesn't get, again, because of the way the episode is structured, despite the fact that we know he's involved from the previously on, he doesn't really show up until, about 2/3 through the episode. And then he kind of just has a few generic lines about these metahumans are expendable and everything. So again, you feel like we could have spent more time with him and maybe gotten more into his pathos as this father who's a little guilty over how his son turned out and and everything. But yeah, still, again, nice to have him back just as a long time a foe of Static's on this show. And then we'll talk about him a little earlier than usual. We do have Jason Marsden briefly as Gear. As mentioned, he's there to say I'm a genius and type some buttons to save the day at the end, along with Static and Hotstreak, and is also voicing Edwin Jr. in this episode as well. So get him, as always, one of those guys who's always pulling double and triple duty in almost every episode he's in, I think. And then we have our main villain to talk about. Or is he a villain? That would be, of course, Danny Cooksey returning as Hotstreak. This is, I think he's really, really fun in this episode, him and Static bouncing off of each other. This is more so, I guess maybe we should talk about this when we talk about Phil Lamar in a second, but like, I wish there was more of like Static struggling with the fact that this guy has been like bullying him since before they had powers.
Right.
And like the secret identity thing that he can't reveal, like there's a very specific reason he should hate Hotstreak kind of more than any of his other villains that he's not really able to talk about because it'll give away the secret identity. But yeah, I think Danny Cooksey as Hotstreak does a good job here. And I guess it had been so long since I had seen this episode, I completely forgot his big Han Solo twist at the end where he comes back to save the day. So I enjoyed him kind of breaking good at the end there. I thought Danny Cooksey did a good job in this particular episode.
What would you grade his, as the DCAU wiki puts it, whooping with joy at the end as he steals or gets to ride off in the aeroplane? What would you give that on a scale of 1 to 10?
That's a good question. I think in my head, because it's kind of a woohoo, it's not the yahoo that Harrison Ford actually hits in the original Star Wars. Right. I'm like, if he had really tried to go for that, I feel like it would be higher. But I'd give it a solid 7 or so out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I'd probably be around there someplace, 6 out of 10, something like that. I don't know that I would even qualify it as whooping. It's not like whoop whoop. It's just like whoop, and he's flying away. So. Yeah, he's like, I know that I guess maybe this is a compliment. He is so annoying. Like the character and the voice is so annoying, and he's supposed to be the bully, obviously. I think maybe the best part of the episode, even though I don't think we really talked about it in plot and how I felt about it, but it feels very out of left field that part of the thing is that he's like scared of hospitals, and that really doesn't even go anywhere. Like it lasts like 30 seconds and then he overcomes it because Static tells him to like overcome it, and he does. But that downbeat where he does have to show vulnerability is something that is completely the opposite of what the character generally portrays. He's a hothead, obviously, and he's boisterous, and he's over the top, and he's arrogant, and he has snide remarks. And to kind of show this downbeat where he shows vulnerability is certainly something different that's asked of his general performance. So yeah, he's an annoying character. He fulfills that role perfectly with the voice casting. So I think that it works in his favor in this case. So yeah, a good performance from Mr. Cooksey.
Absolutely. And then once again, it's our main eventer, Phil Lamar, as mentioned. Like I said, and this is more of a note on plot, I think, than on him. Like I said, I wish there was more of like the beef with Hotstreak should feel a little bit more personal, I think, than it really has since like those first couple episodes of the series when he first popped up. So that's kind of a general note for the series, maybe more than one specific for this episode. But yeah, no complaints about Mr. Lamar's performance. Maybe not one of his stronger Static outings. I do like when he kind of stands his ground and kind of throws it in Alva's face when after he saves the day and Edwin Jr. has returned to normal. He kind of makes the point of saying like, yeah, I didn't do this for you. Like it's the right thing to do, and I'm a hero. And there's real good conviction in his voice in that line. Like I feel like on the page that's so hokey and so like Super Friends almost. But I think it's delivered so well, unsurprisingly by Mr. Lamar. So yeah, there's like I said, there's a little again, maybe in a rewrite of this episode, a theoretical rewrite of this episode where it's more focused on Virgil trying to decide if he's going to help save this kid who tried to kill him and help Edwin Alva Sr., who's been trying to capture him and experiment on him and whatever else has happened in the previous episodes. Maybe that would have given Mr. Lamar more to sink his teeth into, but unsurprisingly does a good job with what's asked of him.
Yeah, I agree. He's unsurprisingly very good. He does have the emotional beats here, the rah-rah speech that he has to get Hotstreak on board with everything. He's constantly bickering with him in those opening sequences. He sounds very calm and chill, which I know is kind of a hallmark of Static, that he nothing really phases him too much. But for whatever reason, in the two opening sequences, I don't know if they re-recorded or something, he sounds just like even more chill than normal in his delivery. So it makes sense, obviously, for that opening sequence because he's laying back and trying to figure out what plans to do for the evening. But it kind of carries over into the next couple of scenes. So, yeah, great job from Mr. Lamar. Very, very unsurprising that we're heaping praise upon his performance.
Absolutely. And yeah, so I ended up settling on a 7 out of 10 for my voice acting score. Like I said, I think Mr. Cooksey and Mr. Lamar do a nice job bouncing off each other. The unlikely buddy cop duo that they are for most of the episode, but like I said, maybe just too many differing ideas kind of all smushed into one for any of our actors to really sink their teeth into to a lot in this one.
Yeah, I also gave it a 7 out of 10. So we went 3 for 4 this week as far as identical scores are concerned. Yeah, I don't have much to add other than what we've talked about. So I guess we will total up our scores for the day. And totaling up my scores, Liam, I end up with a 28 out of 40. What about you?
Right, and by my count, I'm just 1 point higher at a 29 out of 40.
I don't know if we talked about rewatchability last week. I'm just realizing that now, but as far as this week is concerned, the past is the past. We can't go back and change it now. As far as rewatchability this week is concerned, it It does kind of feel like, because this puts the bow on the Edwin Alva Jr. storyline, you kind of gotta watch this if you're watching through Static. So that gets me one thumb up. It's not necessarily mandatory DCAU watch, but I'd say if you're doing a Static watch through, when it comes to season 4 episodes, this kind of puts a bow on a story that starts very early on. So I think you got to give it at least a thumb up. What about you?
Totally agree. Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Alva Senior at least has one more appearance in the show, and this particular episode is referenced. So yeah, I would say this one qualifies if you're doing a Static rewatch. I think you got to come back to this, not only because it caps off a long-term storyline, to your point, but also there's it's referenced in future episodes as well. And like I said, it feels like a big hero moment for Static, inspiring a couple of bad guys, I guess, with Hotstreak and Talon to at least temporarily turn over a new leaf, though I don't believe it lasts for either of them, unfortunately.
We shall see, I suppose. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. As a reminder, we'd love, if you liked this episode, if you liked the podcast, for you to support the podcast. And there are a couple of ways to do so. Following us on social media is certainly one way to do so, on Twitter X or Instagram. Those are the most common ways to reach out to us and engage with us as far as posting things. You can also follow us on Threads and Blue Sky and Facebook, and there's probably another social media thing that we forgot about that we were on at some point that was supposed to replace Twitter and didn't. But either way, if we're still on there and Liam still monitors it, we will eventually engage if you engage with us. So feel free to certainly join in the conversation. As we talk about frequently, it is one of our favorite things to do is certainly hear from those that listen to the pod, get your thoughts on things that we talk about on the episode, give your scores if you have them, share your thoughts in general. It's a big way, a lot of fun for us to engage with those that listen to our little old podcast here. You can also, of course, check out the show notes. There is a link to our store. You can pick up a piece of merchandise if you want to support the pod that way. You can also subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, whether that's Spotify, which also allows you to comment on individual episodes. So if you're not on social media or you prefer just to comment there, if you're on Spotify, comment on the episode, give us your thoughts, give us your scorecard, tell us what you think there. While you're there, leave us a 5-star review as well. And then again, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can leave a 5-star review there. If you leave a little blurb review that they allow there, leave a little description of why you like the podcast, you leave a 5-star review, and you live in the United States, we'll send you a little thank you gift just for doing so. Liam, of course, as we mentioned at the top of the show, the best way to support the podcast is head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review and join one of our support tiers there. And of course, as we mentioned, our top tier, our annual top tier comes with the perk of being able to ask a question regarding the episode that we are reviewing this week. And of course, this week's question of the week, once again, comes from our good friend Zach, who got his question in before the time of recording. And Zach says, would you have liked to have seen this episode start as the beginning of a redemption arc for Hotstreak? So, Liam, we talked about a little bit about it here. We have the episode certainly has a redemption arc for him, as he's very much Static's foe at the beginning, up to no good. By the end of it, he's jumping in the machine, trying to sacrifice himself right along Static. Regardless of the motivation, whether it's because of he feels like Static can't one-up him or if it's for the greater good, he ultimately comes back, saves all the other metahumans, and ultimately shows that he is willing to try and sacrifice himself to save Alva Jr. here. So would you have liked to see this as a bit of a redemption arc like we saw with Rubber Band Man, and eventually have him become maybe an ally of Static in a, hypothetical season 5? Or are you okay with him just kind of being good for this episode, and then the next time we see him returning to his evil ways?
That's a good question. I think I'm always kind of interested in a hero tries to redeem the bad guy. I do think with the exception of Human Torch and I guess Fire, not a lot of good guys that have fire-based powers, right? It's hard to be a good guy when your thing is setting everything on fire, I feel. So maybe his power set just lends itself to chaos and villainy a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I liked this in the sense that I would have liked to have seen that in the sense that I think it increases sort of Virgil's standing as as a hero that inspires others in his own right. And we were just talking last week about going back to the original Static in Africa, and how Static's talking about wishing that there was a superhero that people could look up to, and a Nazi kind of imposing that on him, that he couldn't be that person, and maybe he already is. So it would be cool to see Static step up and inspire somebody to give up a life of crime. But as it is, I think maybe it comes down to Danny Cooksey, as you said, being so good at playing the annoying kind of dumb jock bad guy that it's hard to imagine him being a good guy forever. So I think I'm all right with the decision to send him back to the bad side. What about you?
Yeah, I think that if they were to have done it, I don't think a full rubber band man turn where he's completely on the side of good would have been something that I would have liked to have seen for this character. As you mentioned, his general makeup just doesn't allow for that type of attitude. Now, if you had made him the Venom to Static's Spider-Man, where he kind of has these shades of gray and he's an anti-hero, and speaking of sequences where the hero has to team up with an arch rival in order to defeat a common enemy, Spider-Man and Venom, I feel like, have done that a lot over the existence of those characters. So maybe you turn him into a bit of an anti-hero. Maybe he's somebody who isn't strictly evil. He's still causing chaos and doing things that upset Static, or maybe get in the way of Static's true blue, like good-natured, I'm a good boy type of behavior, and he kind of lives in those shades of gray. That would have been maybe interesting to see with that a character like that interact with Static, because I don't know that we don't have that type of character in this world. And I think seeing Static interact with someone that kind of has more of those shades of gray would have been something different for this show. Like, I know the makeup of the show, and in general, I think understand why the show is pretty clearly, like, who the bad guys are. They're pretty well defined. The good guys are good guys, and the bad guys are bad guys, and there's not a lot of tweeners. But I think having maybe somebody, I don't think a full redemption arc would have been necessarily something that I would have liked to have seen, but I could see where he's maybe not just returning to a life of crime immediately after this experience, but kind of hanging in that anti-hero type of role, kind of being a guy that can kind of go back and forth and be an adversary or an ally to Static, depending on what the situation calls for. I think that could have been interesting as well. All right, Liam, well, that will begin to wrap things up. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. As we mentioned, we are going to continue with our Static reviews here with the month of March, which means that we are going to once again cover another Season 4 episode starting next week. Liam, let's talk about which episode we'll be covering.
That is right, Cal. And so next week we will be back with another Season 4 Static adventure, that being the episode Now You See Him. A speedster in a red suit is coming to Dakota, but not the one you're thinking of. So
it's not that kind of speedster.
It's with the bad guy. No, not exactly. So we'll get into that, and how does Static stop a villain he can't see? We'll have to find out next week.
Can't wait, Liam. It's going to be a fun one. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
We hope you'll join us on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios.